Ladies and gentlemen, you are now entering the Decent Christian Talk podcast. Enjoy.
Decent Christian Talk, episode 18. We're legal. We're officially legal. We can vote, and we can also smoke tobacco legally in the United States of America. Hey guys, thank you for joining us. We are so excited to join you each and every week. And if you haven't noticed the fancy new logos for the Decent Christian Talk podcast, thanks goes to Travis Cooper, longtime friend of mine, who designed those for us. Really cool. Thank you so much, Travis. We really appreciate that. So, before we get going, I need to mention the Hands and Feet Project Fantasy Football League. You still have a chance to get in. I believe the fantasy drafts are actually this coming weekend, Labor Day weekend. So, you can still get in if you want. There's very limited spots open. We are in the league with KJ52, and we will win. So, if you want to have a chance, there's some other leagues that you can join. There's one with Audio Adrenaline, and there's a couple other ones that you can join. But the cost, I believe, is $50, and it goes to support the Hands and Feet Project. So, definitely check that out. We will post the link again with this podcast, and we hope that you'll join us. We look forward to taking down anyone that comes against us in the KJ52 League. So, good luck to you. So, since we last talked, there was not a whole lot of music that's come out in the last few weeks. There is a solo project from Michael Sweet. For those of you who don't know Michael Sweet is the longtime lead vocalist of Stryper. Stryper, for me, was something that my dad listened to. He has a lot of their old vinyls. So I'm always excited when one of these old-timers come back and records an album. And, you know, he's done a lot of stuff within the last few years as a solo artist and with Stryper that I've actually liked. And there's a couple songs on here on this album that are also good. His video that he made for radio is absolutely hysterical. He made a video about all the rock and roll stars that head to Nashville and try to get a country music career going. and he pokes a little, and a lot of that is poking fun at himself because he has done some songwriting for some country artists. So it's a really fun video if you haven't seen that. But the whole album itself is really good. I actually listened to an interview that he did with Chris Jericho where he talked about, you know, his background in music and a lot of what Stryper had dealt with coming up. A lot of that has to do with Stryper's relationship with the church and how that affected them and how the church responded to, you know, a lot of Stryper's success. Because, I mean, Stryper back in the day, I mean, they were played on MTV. Back in the day when MTV played music videos. But yeah, they played them on MTV. They were on mainstream radio. I mean, Stryper was a big deal back in the day. And they still are. I mean, they still do a lot of shows. The last few years, they've done some tours. They've actually got a tour coming up this fall as a special. I think it's the 30th anniversary of To Hell with the Devil, which is obviously their most popular record ever. He talks about that a lot on the Chris Jericho podcast. If you're into Michael Sweet and Stryper, and you don't mind a little bit of language, you should definitely check out Talk is Jericho with Michael Sweet. I know Jericho is a pro wrestler. I know that's probably not for all of you, but as a pro wrestling fan myself, I was very very excited to see that duo get together and talk. So definitely, if you're into that 80s hair metal kind of stuff, this is probably the closest to Stryper that Michael Sweet's solo albums have sounded, and I really enjoyed it. And I just really love the harmonizing guitars that is just synonymous with Stryper. And I would definitely recommend that to anybody that's a longtime Stryper fan. Since the last time we talked, we also had a record from Aaron Gillespie. And Aaron Gillespie is, of course, the longtime drummer for Under Oath. I know he took a hiatus from them, but that when we talk about Under Oath, he's the guy on drums that people usually identify with the golden age of Under Oath. And this latest album there's a lot of covers on it, and there's actually a couple Under Oath covers that he kind of does, kind of stripped down, more of acoustic vibes. And I'm not the biggest fan of covers, but since this style is so much different than the Under Oath style, I really enjoyed some of his takes on some of the Under Oath stuff. A couple years, it's probably been 10 or so, at least 10 or 15 years since some of those tracks have been released from Under Oath. So it's a really unique take. He does a couple other covers. He does Where the Streets Have No Name from U2 and a couple other covers. So if you're an Aaron Gillespie fan, if you're an Under Oath fan, if you're a fan of his, it's not like the Almost or anything. It's more of a stripped down, more like his solo stuff has been. If you're a fan of that, you'll definitely like it. If you're a long-time Under Oath fan that doesn't mind an acoustic cover every now and then, you'll probably like it too. Aaron Gillespie has a great, unique voice, and he's a great artist. And this album is really good. A lot of people might be disappointed that there's not a whole lot of original, it's not an original record per se, but it's still one of those albums that's just good to listen to with the windows down, driving on a summer night. It's really good. We got a lot of good stuff coming out in the next couple of weeks. If you guys haven't checked out the Project 86 Pledge Music campaign, I think they're going to be releasing a lot of their stuff over time, but I know that they've been working on stuff that they're going to release soon, and I think they are. I'm not sure exactly how it's working, but I think if they get so much, they may actually release a double album with this Pledge Music campaign. So if you go to pledgemusic.com and check out the Project 86 Pledge campaign, definitely look into that, because I think they're getting close to funding a double album, which is a big deal because it's their 20th anniversary. They're one of my favorite bands of all time, and I'm excited to see them this fall in my hometown of Morgantown, and it's going to be exciting to hopefully sit down with him. I've talked with him, exchanged some messages with him over the last few weeks, and we're going to try to work something out to get him on the show. Andrew is one of my favorite lyricists in music in general. He's absolutely brilliant. You can tell that he's a very smart when it comes to laying down lyrics that are just so entrenched in literature. You could tell that he's a C.S. Lewis fan. You can tell that he's a history buff. This guy, last time I heard, was in grad school. He's a smart guy. So definitely check that out on Pledge Music. Project 86, their 20th anniversary. You can be a part of that through Pledge Music. I believe there's an All Sons and Daughters record coming out too this weekend called Poets and Saints. I'm a big fan of All Sons and Daughters. They're probably one of my favorite worship bands of the last few years. I know we do a lot of their songs in my home church, and I just kind of like, they're one of those bands that has that stripped down feel of kind of music that I grew up with, where, you know, you can play this song in a band still, and there's not like any loops or any kind of, you know, underneath stuff that's hard to play as a band. It's a very straightforward sound with very good lyrics, not watered down lyrics that you might hear through some other worship bands that we won't get into. But anyway, All Sons and Daughters this week, it's called Poets and Saints. I'm definitely looking forward to this. Another, we talked about Under Oath earlier, another blast from the past that's releasing an album coming out is Jeff Moore. And Jeff Moore and I we had an interview on DecentChristianTalk.com last year, and this is the album that he is releasing through his Kickstarter that he did last year that we kind of helped him promote. So I'm very excited to hear this. Jeff Moore is one of the artists that I grew up with in the 90s in CCM music. You know, he had a lot of really good stuff with Jeff Moore in the Distance. I got to see him on tour probably a half dozen times through the late 90s. He was on tour with the Newsboys one time in the Step Up to the Microphone tour, I believe it was. It was either the Step Up to the Microphone tour or the Take Me to Your Leader tour. I can't remember which one, but it was that was one of my favorite tours of all time, them with the Newsboys. I also remember Creation 1996. They actually headlined Wednesday night at Hershey Park, and I think that was the first time they ever kind of was on that big stage closing out the night at a major festival. And I just remember, you know, growing up as a Jeff Moore fan, just watching him progress as an artist to become a major name. I mean, him in the late 90s was up there with Audio Adrenaline and the Newsboys. I mean, he was a major name in the late 90s. So this is really exciting for me to hear this record. You know, when you hear these artists like Michael W. Smith and Stephen Curtis Chapman, Jeff Moore, when you hear these guys put out albums all these years later, man, you just kind of wonder what keeps these guys going, releasing all this great music. It's really something that, you know, I feel blessed that I get to listen to it. And, you know, guys like Michael W. and Stephen and Jeff Moore, they're not just putting out music. This is still good music, even if they're not necessarily played on the radio like they used to. Really good artists and really good songwriters. And Jeff Moore, I believe it's coming out this week. It's an album called The Next Thing. Definitely check that out. For those of you that listened to Jeff Moore back in the day, I'm sure it'll be a thrill to get to hear his voice again. There's a lot of other stuff coming out. We talked about Norma Jean. They're releasing an album. We talked about that a little bit on the last podcast. Norma Jean, that's another long-time band that's been around a while. Their last album was, man, so good. So I'm so excited to hear this. They've actually released a couple singles, a single or two, to promote this record, and from what it sounds like, it's gonna be really good. And so you definitely need to check that out. One thing I want to say before we get too far, and I can't believe I've not mentioned this, for those of you guys that are on Reddit, and if you're not on Reddit, then you need to get on Reddit. Reddit.com is like, for those of you who don't know, it's like a giant message board that has a bunch of like sub message boards underneath it, and there's a Christian music subreddit on Reddit.com, and I am actually a moderator on there, and we actually just had a thread on there about a lot of Spotify playlists. I know a lot of people don't like Spotify and those kinds of things, but I love using Spotify for things like playlists, and it's really cool to be able to use that in the background, especially when I'm at work and I don't really have access to my entire music library. So anyway, go to the Christian music section on Reddit and check out those Spotify playlists. If you're a fan of this show and you hear some of the songs and albums that we talk about, a lot of those songs and albums end up on my playlist. So if you want to check that out, you just go to reddit.com/christianmusic and it'll show up. And also, along with that, they have a really good comprehensive list every Friday of new music that is released in Christian music, and it's really well done. It's one of the best lists that I've found online. They cover it all. They cover CCM, contemporary, rock, hip hop, even Southern gospel. It's really good. It's really well done. I go there every week, and I find something that I've never even heard of before, and if I don't know it, then it's definitely something that's obscure. But definitely go to that reddit.com/christianmusic and check that out. So I know a lot of you have read that this show was going to have an artist from the land of Down Under, and unfortunately we ran into some technical difficulties. That doesn't mean we're not going to have the interview. We're going to have that interview next time. But instead of just teasing it, I'm actually going to tell you who that interview is with right now. And that is a promotion of the film that they are doing and releasing next month. Long overdue. Yes, that's right. Next podcast, we are going to be joined by Hillsong United. I'm so excited. They're one of my favorite worship groups of all time. Our friend Brendan will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about this. We're actually going to be doing a two-parter. This is going to be so big that we're going to have to do 2 shows, I believe. So, but yeah, Hillsong United will be joining us on the next show. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes. If you're not into iTunes, we're on SoundCloud, we're on YouTube. I think we're on Stitcher Radio. But definitely check that out. And thank you so much for joining us every week. So that brings us to who is joining us this week on this week's podcast. And it's a band called Good Little Giants. It's a band that I had not heard of until very recently. And to be quite honest with you, I wasn't sure if I would dig them because I saw like the genre that they're in, which is kind of a folky kind of music, and I went and saw them live at Creation Fest, and I was blown away by how good they are. And I got to sit down with the guys at Creation Fest and talk with these guys, and I'm going to be honest with you, it was probably one of the more favorite interviews that I did that week, because these guys were really honest with us, and they talked with us about, just the CCM market and, how they feel about standing out and being different, and it's really good. If you guys have not checked out Good Little Giants, you need to go check them out. You can find them anywhere where you can find any music online. But without further ado, here is my interview with Good Little Giants.
All right, hit that horn, babe. Let's dance.
There was a time when we were in...
This is like a standardized test. This big time.
Sweet.
So you guys released a record recently called Arrows.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Arrows is kind of a new evolution for us in a lot of ways, because we started out as a pretty mellow 3-part harmony folk band with all acoustic instruments, and then last year, or 2014 actually, we won the Christian Festival Association National Talent Search, and so we were kind of thinking about okay, we're going to be playing for festival audiences. They're a little bit more upbeat and looking for more fun stuff. And so we started writing more for that audience, knowing that we, a lot of our really kind of melancholy stuff wasn't going to cut the mustard. Right. So we started writing more kind of upbeat stuff, and out of that came this much more energetic pop kind of, we added synth and added electric guitars, and we still got the acoustic instruments, the banjo and the upright bass and the guitar, acoustic guitar, but we added a lot of the other elements that kind of make for more energetic pop music, and so I think the result was really closer to what we've wanted anyway all along, and it's just I don't know, I'm really excited about it. I think it's exactly what we wanted. And
are there any themes lyrically to the record?
Well, the title of it is called Arrows, and it comes from a song. The very last song is called So You Would Know, and there's a line in that song that says, "Oh, the mountains I have sculpted before you came to be are the arrows of creation to point you back to me." And so it's kind of a song, and from God's perspective, seen to us that just look at my creation; my fingerprints are everywhere, and even the mountains are shaped like arrows that kind of point you back to a creator. And so that's what the goal is for all of our songs, and even we've said even our lives. We want our lives and all these songs and everything we do to point back to a creator, to ultimately bring him glory. And so even as a result, the song is the album is much more evangelistic and Christian in nature. A lot of the stuff from before wasn't overtly Christian. I mean, we were Christians then, but it wasn't. This stuff is much more geared toward encouraging and edifying the church, and even challenging the church, and then also there's a song on there called "Ali Ali Oxen Free," which is more evangelistic, calling people out of hiding. So
when you play at a festival like this, it's easy to kind of blend in with everybody. What's different about you guys that kind of helps you guys stand out?
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of bands right now that are blending like the folk aspect of what we do with the mainstream pop rock. And so musically, I think that kind of sets us apart from what other people are doing. But also lyrically, like Scott said before, we're one of our main goals is challenging the church, uplifting the church. But so lyrically, it's a little bit different than just singing, Jesus loves you and that type of thing. And lyrically, it's a little bit, I guess, deeper, just different. It's a different.
I think my music my lyrics that I've written have always had kind of a prophetic edge to them, and not in the sense of forthtelling, but in the sense of calling people to repentance, calling people to a higher standard, and so there's always kind of an edge to my music, which can be a liability, because it can, if I'm not careful, it can come across as negative. But there's always an element of, okay, how can we do this better? Calling people higher, and so there's that aspect. I don't necessarily think that's different than a lot of Christian music, but I, in terms of lyrics, my concern is to be theologically correct and to be giving the whole gospel message, not just the easy gospel message. And I think the whole gospel message includes suffering and all of the perseverance that's required in order to be molded and shaped into the person of Christ, or into the character and the image of Christ. So there's a lot of challenge, and like Shane said, just in terms of the music, I mean, there aren't too many Christian bands running around with upright bass and things like that. Now, this festival, we don't have our bass player with us, but most of the time we have an upright bass player with us, and so that, with the banjo, things like that, it gives it a little bit of a backwoods edge.
And then a synth.
And then we got a synth and some electric guitars and things like that. So,
when you guys play all these festivals and invest everything into the music, how important is it to not get burnt out? Like, what kind of things do you guys do to not get burnt out? Because that's easy to do.
It's very
work another job.
Yeah.
So that I'm not putting everything into this one thing, putting all my eggs in this basket. But
honestly, though, but spacing yourself out, not only not only with your time, because obviously, traveling, playing sucks up a lot of time, but also like musically in your studies. Like if you just studied, the book of, the first 4 chapters of Acts for the next 2 years, well, you're going to get burnt out pretty quickly. And so, studying other ways, communicating with other bands, listening to different music. I mean, there's a lot of, different things that you do, plugging into your local church and serving. I think, serving is a great way to not get burnt out, because you're focusing on other people's needs rather than your own, your own self burning out.
We're trying to kind of spread the load around, the workload around the whole band, so it's not just one person doing all the work. And I burnt myself out after 10 years of doing it independently by myself as a solo act, and then kind of promised myself after that I would never do it alone again. And so we've also, even beyond outside the band, we've been recruiting people to kind of help us with some of the administrative things, and helping us with booking and just different things like that. And so I think, just practically speaking, that's a big thing. In terms of like spiritual burnout and that sort of thing, I think it's really important to be connected to a community, to be having people who are sending you out and praying, giving you a covering of prayer as you're going out. So you're not just kind of deciding on your own, I'm going to be a musician, I'm going to go do this by myself, and nobody back home knows or cares, And so that's one thing. I think last thing, the most important, is that all along the way we've got these milestones of things that are happening. Okay, we just won this contest, and that's going to be our next big break. Or we're just releasing this album. That's going to be the thing that really puts us over the edge and over the top. And or we're talking to a record label, and that's going to be really what we need. And putting our hope into those things, and then watching them all pass and nothing changing, has been a mistake that we've made in the past. And I think if we can keep our hope focused on God and His provision, and regardless of where we are, He's going to be providing for us, even if we're playing no festivals at all and we're just playing tiny churches or little no-name venues or whatever. If we're doing what we can to the best of our ability and for His glory, and seeking our satisfaction in Him, as opposed to that next big thing being what really gives us a sense of accomplishment or success, I think we can avoid that kind of a burnout or that kind of mistake.
How can people stay connected with you and find out about you guys?
Well, we mainly our Facebook page. That's where we've got, and then our website is goodlittlegiants.com.
Okay.
We keep our schedule on there, our tour schedule, and then facebook.com/goodlittlegiants is where we just kind of do our daily posts and updates and thoughts and pictures and things like that. Instagram as well. That's also Good Little Giants. I think Twitter is Good Lil Giants, LIL, because Good Little Giants was too long. It was one too long. So
we could have been a Good Little Giant, but there's more than one.
So those are the best ways. We mostly stay engaged with Instagram and Facebook.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you guys a lot for your time.
Yeah, man. Sure. I appreciate you.
I look forward to the show.
Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses. Thanks.